Welcome back again, everyone. This is Mr. Tanner, and this video is going to help clarify our seasons notes. So, seasons on Earth are due to the Earth's position as it orbits around the sun. And the order of the season, starting with winter, it goes from winter to spring, from spring to summer, and then from summer to fall. This is also known as autumn. And then this would repeat. So autumn would lead back into winter, winter to spring, spring to summer, summer to fall, and it goes around and around again. The sun and the seasons are linked, which just means they're related. The sun is ultimately determining what season it is on Earth. The Earth orbits, which just means it goes around. So the Earth goes around the sun, making its orbit, or one revolution, one full circle, every 365 days. Now, it's actually closer to 365.25 days, but 365 is good enough. The other thing that's really important in determining the seasons is that the Earth, relative to the sun, does not actually point straight up and down. The Earth is tilted on its axis. That's an A there to start. And an axis is an invisible line about which the Earth rotates. And we're going to look at this in a drawing in just a second. Let's try that again. The Earth rotates. So let's take a look at a drawing of that here in just a second. So here is our Earth. And if we had a line running through it, let me maybe make it a different color. Imagine an imaginary line running through this, and that is where the Earth would spin around. So it's going to spin on that point. And if this line is pointing straight up and down, the Earth will spin around perfectly perpendicular, or right at a perpendicular. If this is the sun over here, the Earth is spinning perpendicularly to that. So its axis is perpendicular to the direction of the sun. But the Earth is not straight up and down. So when we look at our imaginary line, the Earth is actually more like this. So the Earth is not spinning straight up and down, it's spinning on this tilt. And what that's important is when we look at dividing the Earth into our north and south hemispheres. Remember from social studies, this is the equator, the line that perfectly divides north from south. So the northern hemisphere sometimes points towards the sun, and sometimes it will point away from the sun. So we'll come back to that in just a second. So like I said, the Earth can be divided into north and south hemispheres. And remember, that point that divides it from the north and south is the equator. And the hemisphere that's pointing towards the sun is getting what we call direct sunlight, which just means that the sunlight is hitting it straight on. That's that perpendicular angle we were talking about. So if the sunlight is going in this direction, it's hitting a perpendicular plane. It's hitting it straight on. Because it's direct sunlight that's hitting at a perpendicular angle, it's hitting it straight on, it warms the Earth more. We get more intense sunlight, and this makes it warmer, which means it is summer. The hemisphere that's pointing away from the sun gets what's called indirect sunlight. So indirect sunlight, and that means that it's hitting at an angle. So again, if the sun rays were coming this way, now it's hitting the Earth at an angle, which spreads out the sun rays and it does not warm it as much. So because the indirect sunlight makes the area of the Earth colder, it is winter. So summer versus winter is just the direct sunlight from pointing towards the sun, or the indirect sunlight from pointing away from the sun. So direct sunlight causes more heat energy. So we have more heat energy reaching Earth. The Earth warms up. Our season is summer. Or I should say that half of the Earth warms up. Indirect sunlight causes less heat energy to reach the Earth. So the part of the Earth that's getting indirect sunlight has less heat energy. It's not as warm. It is winter. So before we go to the diagrams at the bottom, let's take a look at one more drawing here. So here's our sun. And imagine if the Earth is over here. And like I said, because the Earth is tilted on its axis, here's our northern hemisphere. This is our southern hemisphere. Well, in this case, sunlight going directly towards the Earth hits the northern hemisphere at a direct angle. Any sunlight that's hitting the southern hemisphere is hitting at an indirect angle. You can see that this is straight up and down. This, where it hits, is tilted. That's that indirect angle. So it's summer in the northern hemisphere. It's winter in the southern hemisphere. Now, after 6 months, when the Earth has gone halfway around its orbit, the Earth is now over here. Let's try and make it more similar in size. The Earth is over here. And the axis has not changed its tilt. It's still tilted in the exact same way. This is the northern hemisphere. This is the southern hemisphere. And now direct sunlight coming directly from the sun hits the southern hemisphere directly at that angle. And light coming from the sun that hits the northern hemisphere is hitting indirectly. So now it is summer in the southern hemisphere, winter in the northern hemisphere. So hopefully maybe seeing this drawn out in real time helps you predict the seasons. So let's go back now and look at the two drawings at the bottom. So it says circle the diagram showing summer in the northern hemisphere in red and the diagram showing winter in the northern hemisphere in blue. So both times we're looking at the northern hemisphere. So we're always focusing on the northern hemisphere here for what season it is. And the reason I chose the northern hemisphere is because we are all in the northern hemisphere right now in Colorado. So let's draw our sun rays first. So here's our sun. It's hitting the northern hemisphere directly. Light from the sun is hitting the southern hemisphere indirectly. That direct light into the northern hemisphere means that it is summer. So summer in the northern hemisphere, we're going to outline in red. In this other diagram, the direct sunlight is hitting the southern hemisphere now, right? It's making that perpendicular angle we talked about. And now the light is hitting at an angle on the northern hemisphere. This means it is winter in the northern hemisphere, so we would circle this one in blue. Hopefully this video helped clarify how the tilt of the Earth, remember on its axis, that imaginary line running through the Earth, the tilt of the Earth receiving direct sunlight or indirect sunlight determines what season we are in. As always, thanks for watching. Make sure you reach out if you have any questions.